And welcome Down to Earth Convos Down Under, episode 19. In this episode, Carrie Sutton joins us to talk mental health and raising resilient kids, equipped with the mindset and mental tools to thrive in the modern world.
Good morning, Brad. Good morning, Carrie, and welcome to Down to Earth Convos Down Under. How are you?
Oh, incredibly well. Happy to be here.
Great. Yes, thank you very much.
Well.
Great. That's good, Brad. Looks like you're in a nice spot over there in WA.
Definitely on the beach.
Yes, I'm very envious of where Brad's sitting at the moment. You can see the beautiful beach in the background. So, yeah.
It looks very nice. Well, it's our pleasure to have you, Carrie. Carrie Sutton, welcome. And we are so looking forward to having you and you sharing your expertise as an educator, speaker, and author who has helped over 25,000 children, parents, and educators, sharing your strategies and tools and approaches to helping and foster children's positive mental health, which is incredibly needed and more important than ever these days. So today we're going to, tap into your wisdom and expertise so that you can share those tools and strategies to help plant the seeds in parents about how important it is to have resilience, to raise resilient, emotionally healthy children.
Thank you. So, I'm pleased to be here.
Great.
So I used to be a primary school teacher, and I perceived a visible drop in resilience and just kind of ability to handle life among kids compared to what I remember anyway from my peer group at a similar age. And, no doubt my parents would say the same thing about us as their kids compared to them. And my grandparents would probably say a similar thing to, my parents, their kids. What's going on here? Is there a phenomenon? Is something happening, or is it maybe just a perception? What do you think?
Well, really interesting question, because we never ask anybody their age. So I'm not going to ask you how old you are, but what you will have noticed, and I guess, as you can see, grey hair, have been teaching a little while now. And I've been concerned most probably for the past almost 2 decades, where we've seen a decline in resilience, and now it's becoming an overwhelming, almost to a certain degree, overwhelming mental health crisis, and it's not just in Australia. So it isn't just us, it's actually around the world, where anxiety, depression, self-harm, and suicide are actually impacting this generation. And we call it a new morbidity. Why it's happening, I can't exactly say, but one of the things, I guess, and I discuss it in the book, but it's more important to know, we need to help children deal with, become emotionally intelligent and deal with uncomfortable feelings. Because if you, and I don't know if you have any kids, Brad, but I know with Ali's got kids, and I've had, so what you have is a piece of your heart walking around outside your body. And you want to protect that. You want to make sure it's okay. You love that person beyond, you cannot even understand how much you will love your own children until you have them. And then when you see them experiencing these difficult things, what we frequently do, just like, and if you think of the brain, so this is Dan Siegel's work. So this is like the brain, and the amygdala is under here, prefrontal cortex. In the front of the prefrontal cortex, which sits right here, we have things called mirror neurons. And what mirror neurons do is, when we see somebody who's in pain, we actually feel that ourselves. So within the past 20 to 25 years, we've had something called an fMRI, which is a functional MRI machine, which means you slide into the machine. When they show you pictures, they can see where the brain lights up. When you see pictures of somebody actually in pain, whether it be emotional pain or physical pain, the areas of the brain that lights up are actually the same areas where we would be experiencing that pain ourselves. So when parents see their children going through pain, what they want to do is scoop them up, is rescue them, is protect them from that. And I guess it's interesting, and I've been a teacher for a while and have done different things, consulting with families and things. I don't know if you've ever seen it. There's 2 cartoons that sit side by side. One of them is of the 70s, where a child has gotten an E on a report card, and the teacher's sitting there giving the report card to the parent's going through the child like a dose of salts. In the 2000s, or at least 2010, the same picture happens, except this time the parents are going through the teacher like a dose of salts. And it's almost like, why didn't my child get this grade? And why did this happen? And you should have done this. We actually have to help our children, one, take personal responsibility, and two, experience discomfort and allow them to fail. So these are some of the things that are decreasing their resilience, because if we continue to allow them to not experience pain, what's going to happen is when they become, or when they do fail, and life isn't about getting all what we want. I mean, the three of us would have gone through job interviews that didn't go well. We have to sit in traffic at times that we don't like. There are things that we have to do that we don't want to do, and also that things that don't go our way. And I'm sure you've both seen it. If you have been to children's birthday parties lately or heard friends talk about it, they actually changed the game. So there's no winner and loser. I'm sure Ali and I, Brad, and I don't know if you, but when you played Pass the Parcel, was there only ever one prize?
That's right, there is. And there was like
Yes.
the musical chairs. When you run out, you got to sit out.
Sit down. But now, oh no, we don't want children being upset. Poppycock. And I'm not saying we go out and upset our children on purpose. What I am saying is that we don't give every child a prize. At school, why are children just getting ribbons for participating? That's not
That's
okay,
right.
because life is a participatory sport. We all have to participate, and you don't get a ribbon just for showing up, let me tell you. And these are the sorts of things that, so when Brad, you asked about, going back to your question, is it generation upon generation going, oh, they're less resilient? I had a fascinating conversation yesterday with somebody about post-traumatic stress disorder, or what it looks like, and how emotionally intelligent. If you think back to World War I and things like that, they actually didn't talk a lot about it. So they may have actually been less resilient, but First World War, Second World War, they came back damaged men generally, because men went to war. And they often snapped more quickly. They were doing so their resilience was actually lessened by what they had experienced, because their capacity and tolerance for those sorts of things. So, but they weren't talking about it. So when you look at that and say, yes, absolutely, people were more resilient. They learned to deal with discomfort. They learned to deal with disappointment and uncomfortable feelings. And now, because often, and I've worked as a guidance officer, and I've had to say to parents, I understand that you want to be your child's friend or to be liked. That's not what being a parent is about. Being a parent is taking a leadership responsibility in that relationship with your child, teaching them things, and sometimes being disliked. We are not always going to be liked.
Agree.
So,
Agree
100%. Those are the sorts of things that I talk to parents about. And when to say, and it will be fascinating. So I'm not sure if you're aware, the past 2 or 3 weeks in Australia, there's been a book release called Generation Alpha. And it's written by Mark McCrindle, and it's the first generation, and I don't have my iPad on me, but where screens and technology, that's what they've grown up with. So they won't be like they'll look at a laptop, which I'm sitting in front of at the moment, and go, that's a bit of a dinosaur, really. Whereas I look at this and think about the phone where I used to dial, and you just go, that's a dinosaur. So it's often looking at that. And Mark McCrindle was saying, we will have to watch our children, because their resilience is taking a hit. And I'm not sure what it was like when you went to school, Brad, but I know for Ali and I, we could go home and shut the door. And that frequently kept those problems outside. But now, with the stuff going on online, with other things happening, you can't shut the door, you can't escape. So we're going to have to give our children, and that's what worries me. This mental health crisis started before those sorts of things were happening, and it's only going to be escalated unless we give our children the tools to deal with it.
Absolutely. And the parents the tools, don't you think, Carrie?
Yeah. And that's where the children will get the tools. I'm being quite honest. Schools are overwhelmed. There is so much being piled on teachers at the moment. Oh, you've got to do this. You've got to teach it. And now about consent and respectful relationships and this and that. Schools have way too much in the curriculum already. And
Yeah.
if they do start trying to teach about this, and I understand, and we can model it. So I talk to educators and parents about modeling things. That's what we'll do. If you want a child to respect you, model respect. If you want
Yes.
somebody to have these sorts of things, we need to be the models, because we are the grown-ups. We're the
I
adults.
love that.
We need to be modeling.
I love that. I would love to talk to that actually, Carrie. Like, if it's true that we're a product of our upbringing, that we're a product of our environment, and that our children are a reflection of the parent. And if you look back into where does a child spend most of their time, which is among their carers, most likely parents. So how important is it to make parents aware that they need to show their kids what resilience looks like in the real flesh? Because they say that a child learns from what we do, not what we say. So how is the parents responding to life's getting tough? Life's hard. It hasn't gone our way. It's disappointing. So they're going to look at us to see how we respond and how we react to that. So it's really important that these parents understand this, isn't it? And share that and teach that to their children through doing, leading by the example.
It is incredibly important, Ali. You have hit the nail on the head. As you said, when we are parented as children between 0 and even before birth, but between 0 and 5 to 8, early childhood years, we actually don't have a filter. So our brains do not have that filter yet. So if somebody said, yeah, you're a little bastard all the time, guess what they'll start to believe? And what happens is that actually then gets embedded in the habitual center of our brain, how we think about it. It becomes, as I call it, the itty bitty crappy committee that sits on your shoulder. That is fed by what is said to us in early childhood, what is modeled for us in early childhood. And
which turns into internal dialogue, doesn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's that itty bitty crappy committee. You're not going to be any good at maths. No, your mother's hopeless at maths. You're a girl. You're going to be hopeless at maths too, or whatever it is, whatever's being said. And I'm hoping that's not what parents say, but living in a household, and this has been exacerbated in 2020 when people had to stay home and parent as well as work, which was incredibly difficult for parents. But we have lived through an unprecedented time, and the level of anxiety that has been showing in our children in their past 12 months to 18 months, because our anxiety is rising. So society's anxiety in general is rising about COVID. But what we've seen is that parents' anxiety is rising. And I know what we've seen in Australia, unfortunately, is a rise in domestic violence. And when children see that rise in domestic violence, because then they'll see their parents resolving issues in this way. If you see, if it's modeled for, that's it, resolving. Because if it's modeled for you, when I get angry, I punch a wall and put a hole in it. Mm-hmm. That's what you'll understand to do. When I get angry, I punch a wall and put a hole in it. That's what you do. When you want to get your own way, you push people around. Or when you want something done, you yell at people. And I'm not saying this happens in the majority of households, but what I am saying is there's been more stress, more tension around money. Drinking. Absolutely. A huge significant rise in drinking. And it's not just in Australia. This is around the world. These sorts of things have been happening. And it's interesting in Australia, what's happened is they are now getting one call every 60 seconds. Kids Helpline is getting one call every 60 seconds. From children in the 5 to 12-year-old age range.
Can I just share something with you? Like, it was a tough time for everyone, particularly in the beginning when we didn't really understand what was going on last year. I remember, and this is just an example of my type of parenting, and people that know me well would understand that this to be true. I would go for a run, literally pound it out, and then I sort of have this sort of gung-ho, and I know that I'm my age and my children are older, so they're not like young children. But if I had grandchildren, I would be sharing this with them. But I'd put the music on loud. I started washing windows and just going, I'm going to be the last one standing. So I want to teach resilience. It's just be healthy, think health and wellness. Stop, stop going down this hole and living in fear, and turn the TV off. But that's another whole subject we could talk about.
That is
Media.
the critical thing, is looking and saying the doom scrolling or the watching, because if you think it's been 10 years since the Fukushima meltdown this year, and what that really showed me at the time, and before that we had 9/11, so 10 years before that we had 9/11 and it happened, and there was 24-hour coverage and things like that. But Fukushima was really the point where I thought we've actually gone past the tipping point now, where there was just constant updates on this, on social media, like in social media, on our phones, in the news, on the radio, just consistently rolling. And it was fascinating. At this time last year, I was working with a group of families, and the father said to me, actually it was in March, and the father said to me, you know, I thought I was watching my child's media diet. We don't watch television. We try and keep it off at home because we know there's all this stuff about COVID and what's happening overseas and how it might be coming here. And he said, I was in the car the other day and my little person was buckled into their seat in the back. And he said, am I going to die, Daddy? Or are you going to die? And he said, why do you say that? What's wrong? And he said, because I'm hearing on the radio. And he said, I had the ABC radio on. So I was thinking that the ABC was a really good station and that like everything, things would be okay. Like it was just news. He said, I didn't realize how much my 8-year-old was picking up and how anxious and worried. Can you imagine being 8, hearing all this stuff, being overwhelmed and thinking, the people like the people who take care of me are possibly going to die. What if I die? Like everybody's talking about death. And so he said, I stopped the car and I made sure I turned and faced him and talked to him about it and said, no, we're keeping ourselves safe. Like we're coughing into our elbows. We're always sanitizing our hands. And another thing you can do when children are feeling really overwhelmed is give them some proactive things. I don't know if you guys have ever seen it, but it's circle of influence and circle of concern. So there's 2 concentric circles. What is in the outside of that circle are things we can't control. So when I talk to families, I say, look, let your kids focus on what they can control. So if it was during lockdown, what we could control was looking at everybody around the world. And I tried to use this as a really good example. I said, look, everybody's staying inside. And that's what we're doing proactively. Like we're choosing, this is the largest act of kindness of humankind ever on a world scale. Everybody, London, Paris, around the world, the US, Australia, we were all staying inside. You could see the Nepalese mountains, like the Mount Everest and things like that. And I said, this is us staying inside to protect our elders, because what it was doing is giving them a sense of control and ownership. They could say, oh, I am doing a job. I'm coughing into my elbow. I'm cleaning my hands. I'm staying away from grandma and grandpa. I'm doing the right thing. So it gave them that sense of power and control. Now, I'm not saying power over parents. What I am saying is power over themselves, that they knew and they had a sense of belonging and that they were actually doing something that was positive and making a difference, because there was so much overwhelming negativity.
Yeah, that's right. What would you like to say to that one, Brad?
Yeah, I'm just thinking the media is something that you will really want to limit, because it's just a constant, we call it FUD, fear, uncertainty, doubt, just constantly blasted out. And that's not good for adults' resilience as much as it is kids either. So, and it eats away at you like death by 1,000 cuts sort of thing. So
yeah,
I think minimizing that is a massive boon to the ability for kids and parents alike to thrive.
I love that death by 1,000 cuts, or the 1,000 cuts idea, because you don't notice it on our psychological well-being and children. You won't notice it. It's like chipping away, but those cuts, cut, chip. You won't notice it till you actually end up with somebody who is spiraling downwards. And when you start spiraling downwards, it's one hell of a lot easier to keep spiraling downwards than to come back up. Absolutely, come back up into a positive spiral. So it's much better for everyone's psychological well-being and emotional well-being if we can. And when I'm talking about positive mental health, it's not being happy all the time. That's actually a disorder, because that can be called mania. And I'm not making fun of that, but it's not about being happy all the time. It's actually about what are we feeding our brains? Because as I teach children, you think real estate and buying by the beach or things like that, the most valuable piece of real estate you ever have, and this is with older kids, is right here. How do we take care of our brains? How do we take care of our mental health and emotional health? Because that's what you have for life.
Interesting. And Carrie, isn't it interesting that and it's just something that's just come in, a child might know how to be fit, physically fit. They'll know they've been taught. It seems like our parents can teach us how to eat well, eat nutritious food, make the healthy choice, exercise, and that's how we become physically fit. But there's not a lot of people in homes talking about mental health and wellness, is it? It should be a conversation that needs to be said on a very regular basis and checking in with our kids through love, connection, and communication, would you say?
I love that. The love, the connection, the communication, because again, and that's why I use the term mental fitness, because often when parents talk about mental health, and you see this at schools and teenagers particularly, like they'll do, we're going to do a mental health day. And what do they talk about? Depression, OCD or ODD, anxiety, eating disorders. This is not about mental health. That's actually mental illness. And why parents often have a difficult time dealing with developing these positive, and I would say to it, it's positive habits of mind. It's looking at how can we help our kids be more optimistic? How can we help them be more grateful? How can we help them savor things and not, I know I'm one of the ones that used to hoover my food. Because I don't live to eat, I eat to live, if that makes sense. So I just go, I've got to eat. Yep, off I trot, eat, scoff, but I'm not enjoying it. And that actually taking that time to mindfully sit and enjoy a meal. Now, I know when we were growing up, we ate around the table as a family. That's fantastic. But when Mitchell was growing up, it got a bit busier and, sport was here and doing things. So how can you have that love, connection, and communication? And how can you make sure that you're teaching them to go, you know what? Instead of waking up and going, my brain is on that hamster wheel as soon as I wake up going, this is what I've got to do today. And this is the things, and I've got to have this list and do all of that. How can we actually go, you know what? Slow our brains down, because when our brains are on that hamster wheel running, we're actually living above the red line. And a lot of our children are living above the red line as well. And what I mean by that is above the red line is where cortisol and adrenaline kick in. And when cortisol and adrenaline, and it's the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. So when you've got fight, flight, or freeze, what you'll find is the cortisol and adrenaline just are there all the time. And often when children are highly anxious, that's what they're living in. And they don't get time to rest and digest, to actually go, you know what, play. Just play or read or spend time having a snuggle with a family member. Yeah, it is that love, connection, and communication.
That's right. And with their animals or nature, the beach, their sport, some kids are into surfing or whatever it is for them. That's their me time and their mindfulness time. That's very beautiful. So I reflect back on my mum was a primary school teacher. I don't know whether I mentioned that. So she was very big on having the family meal at the table. And that was a chance, an opportunity for a sibling, one of my siblings or one of the kids to step up and say, how was your day? So it's really checking in them, isn't it? Even if you're driving kids from school or to sport, my mum used to say, what was the best part of your day? And then she remembered to ask, so what did you struggle with today? So, I mean, these are easy, very valuable questions to ask a child on a regular basis, to keep checking in with them. And then they understand that they know that the parent is there for them. If you've got to listen intently and not be distracted by, we're guilty of having devices as well. I know I think Gary Chapman's book, The 5 Love Languages, what's your child's love language? One of my kids is definitely quality time. So he knows when I'm being present with him. So I made this pat that it was if he came in the room, and this was when he was growing up and he's my youngest, he's now 19, but I would just go, just wait a minute, mate, just because then I'm with him present, and I just close my laptop. Okay, what's up? And I think this is important to understand, that quality time and being present with your child is just so important. And then they are a reflection of us, the parent.
And it's interesting that you say, because that's a conscious choice you make. And it's those conscious choices we make as parents. How are we showing up? And it may be that we were parented in a different way, but that we are now making a conscious choice to be different as parents. And I know Brad and I were talking about before we started, he's made a conscious choice about certain things because of the values he holds. And he said, I couldn't do that anymore. I need to move to this way. But that's a conscious choice. And it is the intentional activities. What do we do for ourselves? Are we self-compassionate? Because if our children will pick up on whether we say, oh, well, so for example, I'm not particularly good at spatial awareness. And I can be clumsy at times, or I'll run into things, particularly if I'm in a hurry. But I often say, oh, you're so clumsy. But what I realized was I was modeling that, and I was modeling negativity about myself for Mitchell. And I just thought, I can't do that. I can't actually keep saying negative things about myself. And so the first point is awareness and going, how do we talk about ourselves? Because our children will model that and then go, it's okay to say bad things about yourself or to say negative things about yourself. And we won't even have said those words. What they will have done is watched our behavior and our actions.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it is about understanding ourselves. I talk about the emotional, or being really emotionally intelligent, or developing our emotional intelligence skills, and help. As parents, we need to help our children do that, because unless we can name it, and again, this is Dan Siegel's work, name it to tame it. So what goes on up here, what we think is often driven by what we feel. And unless we can understand that, we might be feeling disappointed, or we might be feeling uneasy, or we might be feeling we might be feeling different things. But unless children have the language, what they'll often do is go straight to anger, or because anger is easy to understand. So if they're feeling uncomfortable, they don't know what's going on, or disappointed, what they do is go almost straight to anger, because anger is something they know, and they know how to express that, and they've got the words for it. So that's why self-awareness first, and understanding as adults, what are we feeling, and also being willing to say to to kids, I went for a job, but I was really disappointed because I missed out, and it hurts sometimes, and I'm going to go take a bubble bath now because I am disappointed, and that's one of my strategies to do, go take a bubble bath or whatever it is. But when I come back, it's going to be okay. Like, I'm going to be able to work through it. So it's showing kids that you can be disappointed, that you can feel disappointed, or feel these emotions, or feel happy, or feel sad, or those sorts of things. This is what I do when I do that. So, and explain to them how you cope. So self-awareness, and then self-regulation, then social awareness, because that's when you can tell children, how when sometimes we feel sad, you can see that other little person is feeling sad too. Look at their face, look at their body language. So and then how do we manage those relationships? But it's often the critical nature of parents. It's the parents and the educators who model this, and it's often what they see modeled that children will then demonstrate.
That's right. So that's really great that you bring the educators in there, the teachers, because I'm a big fan of teachers. I mean, I just know that they're struggling in that system that's broken. So it's not, as you said earlier, Carrie, the teachers are overwhelmed. So it's so important. The better job that we do as parents, it helps the parent, it helps the teachers, and it helps the child. It's just like this lovely cycle, isn't it? If we all did it well, it would be really beautiful. So name it to tame it. Yeah, to understand it. And when you were talking about the child who might know anger because they might have had that demonstrated by maybe one or two of their parents, or just life and the television and movies. Yep. And then the other spectrum would be those that withdraw and go within and not share their feelings. And you actually might think that life's going okay for them, but they're not sharing their feelings. So how would we know if we're not asking the questions and tapping into them? And teaching
knowing the signs is, so and I say to parents, your children best. Don't doubt yourself. You are the experts in your children. So if you see a sign that you are worried about, ask. And it may be, and I used to sit back to back with Mitchell, and you were talking about it before, Ali, when you're driving in the car, and particularly with tweens and teens, absolutely fantastic time, because you don't have to look at them and they don't have to look at you. So there can be a conversation going on, and you can be driving, and all sorts of things can be discussed because you're present with them. But and that's why when I was sitting back to back, is that I'm there. He can feel I'm there. He knows I'm there. He knows I'm paying attention. But also the other thing to do is, one, driving, you wouldn't have these out anyway. But two, as you did with your laptop, and you say, you know what, I've put it on airplane mode. It's down. This is your time. Because if you, as you said, that little person who is more quiet or who is introverted or who takes it inside, we need to be able to go, something's not right. And say to them in a delicate way, you know, I've noticed that lately it doesn't seem you're as happy as you were before, or as I've noticed that you're not eating this for like your favorite foods, or you're not doing this. I've noticed these things. Is everything okay? What's happening? Can you talk to me about that? So most probably not, is everything okay? Because that's a yes or no answer, but can you give
What's
them
on your mind?
open-ended question to say, look, I've noticed this. Can you tell me what's going on for you? Because I'm just a bit concerned.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. During that time, I remember when it was around Anzac Day. So quite it was over a year ago. I spoke to a friend of mine who's a parent, and she's about 70. She looks about 60. You need to see a driver's license. But I remember her sharing with me a strategy or a tool that she thought would be a great idea for us to use in our family, which was the talking stick, which gives everyone a chance to have a say or to talk about whatever's on their mind, and no one's allowed to interrupt. So whoever's holding the stick, so a great one to use for families, like with young children, they could run out to the garden, get a stick. Whoever's got the stick has the say, is the speaker. If anyone wants to say anything, they have to write it down, never interrupt the speaker. So in a family environment where you feel comfortable with your own family, this is one way that we could share, but I'd love to hear more of your tools and strategies that you use for families.
Oh, absolutely. I talk about a talking stick with families because it is so important to take turns and to feel listened to. And the communication around the dinner table, at night, even with teenagers, the nightly routine of saying goodnight or of just letting them know in a certain way. So for younger children, absolutely reading and teaching. So starting with younger children, but one of the things is about 3 good things. So we talk about the good things that happen during the day just before they go to bed, because what it's doing is actually priming the brain. And giving them positive thoughts as they go to sleep. So what I say is we get into that habit when they're little, and then we just encourage them to keep going. So whether it is at the dinner table as well, so absolutely at least once a week. I don't know if you guys know Michael Carr-Gregg, but Michael Carr-Gregg used to have the rule and has the rule, these things never at the dinner table. So you put everything like devices, other things away, doesn't happen, even if you have to lock them up in a case. He didn't have to do that because his kids are older now, but I know there are those phone lock cases are very popular. But again, it's actually being present and having those routines, having those rituals, and just because often what happens is we don't see it with our tweens and teens, but they start spiraling and we're not aware of it. And they're not getting that positivity or the hits of positivity as much. And again, it's not having those major spikes during the day. It's just noticing a beautiful sunrise, or walking with the dog, or getting outside, or doing something like that, where it's little hits of well-being and little hits of positivity that actually increase our well-being and our overall level of well-being. And it's understanding that when parents and families have conversations, being really respectful and understanding and saying, okay, how can we do that? A talking stick is one of those ways. Or you can play games or do puzzles together, or something that actually gives them a combined, whatever works for your family. Is it riding bikes? Is it doing a puzzle? Whatever it is, it's a family and child and adult fit. But it's just making sure that, coming back to what you were saying before, Ali, that they know they're loved, that they're connected, and that you're communicating with them. Yeah. And particularly, I guess, because across the spectrum, like across everything, there's been a Harvard study that's gone on for over 70 years. And it's looking at levels of subjective or emotional and psychological well-being. And the thing that trumps everything else is relationships. So if you will, and I do apologize. I'm not sure about what is the highest card in a pack, but if it was the Ace of Hearts or whatever is the highest card, that is the thing. It is a relationship. So knowing that we are a herd animal, humans are herd animals. We want to belong. We want to be accepted. We want to be loved. So having those deep connections with your family, with your friends, and I know Brad and I were talking about before we started, that connection for psychological well-being of having good friends and knowing that both good friends and family, having those around you, that's a huge protective factor, a significant, and I cannot stress that enough. So that love, connection, and that communication. And that's why, seriously, through 2020, whether it be Zoom, whether it be our phones, being able to do that. I was talking to a group on Friday and I said, the worst thing we actually could have ever said was social distancing, because we are social beings. It was actually physical distancing. So we still needed to keep those social connections, because you look at how all of our well-being actually took a hit last year, a collective well-being, because we were actually socially distanced as well. So yeah, it is those three things.
That's right. Yeah. Disconnects us when we've got our beautiful smile covered up and, we have to see the smiling eyes and those sort of things. Very beautiful. Talking about friendships and the kids, and that's what Brad and you spoke about earlier before I joined you. Friendship 5, I remember you touching on that in a podcast that I listened to, which was really lovely. Would you want to share a little bit about that if we've got time?
Absolutely. So if you look at, because sometimes children have a difficult time, particularly young children, but even teenagers, if you can start teaching them this, because friendship is very important for kids. But if you look at it, it's the hand, and it's easy to remember. One is that these are the 5 good things people do. They share and take, so they share their things and take turns. They're kind. They tell the truth. They're grateful, and that they don't hurt people. So there's 5 things that you look at and go, okay, they tell the truth. They share and take turns. They're kind. They're grateful. They're not hurt. And what you can say, because sometimes children don't understand that, they'll go, are they doing these things? Because if they're doing some of those things, but they're doing other things that are going against that. So if they're not telling the truth, if they're backstabbing you, if they're not sharing or taking turns, if they're not being, they're actually not being good friends. So we need to help them understand that. And it's actually a way of helping our children be protective of themselves, because children are often wanting to be friends, and they'll be friends and they'll find it hard to make friends. And particularly for younger children, kids can say nasty things. Children, I've got to be honest, and Brad would know this, having been a teacher, children can be some of the nastiest little people on the planet. They're not nice. They say, because often as adults, we learn you can't say that because it's socially inappropriate. Children will go, blah, and it's out there, and hurt, and feelings can be hurt. And so we also need to teach our children, how do we deal with things when that happens? But if people are doing these things repeatedly, no, actually, you don't want to be friends with them. It's most probably a better idea if we can make friends with other people. And often I say to families, if that's been happening and you find that, make your child a honeypot. So it may be that for younger children, you go to something like, a bounce, and you don't have bouncing. So a trampoline environment, or you say, we're going to do that, or we do fun things that come over to our place. We're going to do these sorts of things. That's making them a honeypot, so they can then have friends come over. And particularly for shy children, that most probably they're in their own environment. They know what you're going to be doing because you will have talked to them about that. So then you can get friends come over, and in a smaller group, they can learn how to interact and be friendly and things like that. But if that's what's happening for your teenage and tweenage kids, go out somewhere, play Laser Force or do something like that. And it gives them an opportunity to feel confident, to feel like that they actually have friends, because sometimes children and young adults can be really cruel and say, oh, you're not, and especially with what goes on this, they'll text. And what I often say to people is, remind your kids that there's somebody else on the other side of that screen with feelings, who's a sister, a mom, or whatever. So don't attack people. be kind, be generous, be willing to understand that there are people and that they have feelings, and that sometimes, when they said those nasty things, that's actually not about you. That's more about them.
That's lovely, to remind kids of that, especially with the social media. I remember I was doing a little survey about asking my husband, Rob, what is the just like one sentence, one quote that was handed down to you by your mum? That's a good thing. And he said, treat others the way you want to be treated yourself. And how often have we heard that growing up? Isn't that a beautiful one to remind kids? So therefore, think about before you post something or send a message, how would you feel if you received that? Let's just be kind, and thoughtful.
Absolutely, because unfortunately, and I know Brad's worked online, he would have seen a lot of it where these digital warriors or whoever they are, they get on and whether it be trolls, whether it be people who've had a bad day and you know what? This is what's happened with social media and what's happened with the internet in general, is that it's allowed a lot more socially unacceptable behavior to come to the fore. Because if you look at a lot of the comments and things that are said, they actually wouldn't say those things face to face with somebody else. They wouldn't have the guts or the balls or whatever you want. No, that's not, because that the majority of people wouldn't do that anyway. Whereas when you've got the anonymity of sitting behind a screen and you don't see the words, it's interesting. And you were talking about a strategy. So I know we're going to wrap it up soon, but one of the strategies we talk about, and I've shown, and I don't know whether Brad will have used this because I know he's taught primary school before, I use an apple. And so when we talk about whether it be and I use this with teenagers with social media as well, or children younger children in primary schools. And what I say is, when you send that text or when you do that, it's like dropping an apple. So we drop the apple on the ground, and things like that. And I said, you often can't see the results. And so we go around the group, but when you cut the apple in half and when you look at it, you will see all those bruised marks. And I said, you may not see it from the outside, but that's what happens. I also, with teenagers, I also use a piece of wood, and I get them to hammer a nail into a piece of wood. And I say, think about those barbed words that you're using. Hammer that nail in. Now remove it. And they look at me and I say, well, what's happened? The nail's gone. I said, yeah, that's what happens when you apologize. And when you say, look, I'm really sorry, I didn't do that, but can you see what's left in that piece of wood? And I said, it's a hole. And I said, yeah. I said, those words, think about what you're saying, whether you're texting, whether you're emailing. If you're saying nasty, horrible things, you can apologize and try. I said, but you'll never pull those words back. You can't take them back physically, and there will always be a piece of damage left, whether it's damaging that friendship. And it's again, like your concept of the social media, death by 1,000 cuts, Brad, it's just reminding them, you know what, there's always a consequence.
Yeah, and the whole, you can't take it back. You can, try and fix the damage or whatever, but you've already done that, and that's shown a part of who you are that other people are going to be aware of then. And it's like, do you want other people knowing that you are capable or willing to do these terrible things? Probably not, because it's going to hurt you going forward. And I get that that's probably not something that you can talk to a small child about, but definitely teenagers will understand that concept of especially because forward.
Exactly what you said, Brad, that's their character. You are showing this is part of your character. And if you are going to show that, people are going to understand or think that this is how you behave all the time. If you behave like this now, people aren't going to want to be friends with you, let me tell you.
And then we'll show them the other side with the apple. You want to share kindness and beautiful words and comment on what they're doing well and their beautiful, unique gifts that they've been gifted with. And then you're shining the apple, or you're washing it and then shining it every time. So you can show them, what would you like to be?
Absolutely.
And that's or the shiny one.
Yeah, we talk about that because I say to people, that's what happens there. But when you are kind to people, this is what happens, because it's like we're shining them and we're giving them appreciation and consideration. So, yeah.
Oh, that's lovely work you're doing, Carrie. That's so really beautiful. It's so important so they can really get a visual, because the brain learns in pictures, doesn't it? So they really understand that those words can cut deep. So that's great. Oh, I'm really enjoying today. How are we going for time, Brad?
I think it's about time we talk about our key takeaways. So I think for me, definitely the connection element. So the friendship, the community, the family unit bonding there. Like there's been so many studies of like rats and other animals that if you put like cocaine or hard drugs in with them, you know, they'll go after that. If they've got activities to do and a social life with their family, they either don't touch the drugs ever, or they touch it like once every couple of months. It's like essentially never. So it's the same in humans, and it's been shown that drug addicts almost always suffer from that human connection, and obviously that goes back to childhood issues and all sorts of things. But if you put them in an environment where there's the social connection and something to look forward to in life, and you know, positive things going on, it makes the world a difference.
Absolutely, Brad. And that is so, looking at those studies fascinate me because those drugs are really addictive, powerful drugs. But the thing, as you said, it is and what happens with the receptors in our brain and the dopamine receptors, that we get that in another way when we've got those positive connections and love in our life. So thank you. Was interesting.
That's lovely. Well, thank you, Carrie, for joining us today. This is just so valuable for every parent and the teachers even to tap into this as well, not to mention the kids as well. So it's like, I think you've given us a lot today for all of those, for the whole family and the teachers, the educators. I loved the conversations that we have at the dinner table. Before we go to sleep, let's keep in nice things, good things, at least 3 things on going to bed. And ritual, so create a ritual and a routine around that, because I really believe the power of that subconscious mind, what you go to bed on, you know, you go to bed on gratitude, you wake up grateful, that sort of thing. So I think that's beautiful. And I love the Friendship 5 that you shared. I think that would be a wonderful thing. And I'm hoping that you've got these strategies somewhere tucked away in that book of yours, which I'm sure Brad's going to hopefully, have you got it handy to show everyone? We'd love to.
I actually gave away the last 2 copies
that's right.
on Friday, so I do apologize. But you can find it easily. It's just called Raising a Mentally Fit Generation. Look for it, it's fine. But honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure learning from both of you, and just being on a podcast and sharing the message, no matter who. I guess I just look at it and go, whoever needs it will hear it. And I'm just so grateful I can share just different ideas with your audience to make their lives and the lives of their children better.
Oh, thank you, Carrie. That's beautifully said. And Brad, you're going to share Carrie's details in our links below. So
certainly
that'll be
will.
wonderful.
I'll have a link to the book, definitely. Do you have a website?
Yes, I do.
And I'll put a link to that as well. Perfect.
Yeah, cool.
Oh,
Thanks
that's
for joining
lovely.
us.
Thanks again, Carrie.
Have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you. You too. Thanks, Carrie.
If you know someone who might benefit from today's conversation, please share it. See you again next time. Bye for now.